His palm was flat on my lower back before I even realized he'd moved. I was bent slightly over the dishwasher loading plates. His hand stayed there, warm, still, too long to be accidental. I froze. The kitchen light was humming. The scent of lemon detergent hung in the air. His hand didn't move. Neither did I. Then slowly he took it away, said nothing, walked back to the living room like it didn't happen. I stood there with a plate in my hand, my face burning. That was the first moment I realized he hadn't left with her. I'm not proud of what I let happen after that. I'm not even sure when it crossed from strange to dangerous, but it started there with a hand that lingered, in my own house, from someone I should have told to leave the minute my daughter did. I'm 49, divorced. I live in a quiet neighborhood where sprinklers go off at 6 a.m. and the trash trucks rattle down the street on Thursdays. When Clara moved out, it was quiet in a new way. Not peaceful quiet, hollow quiet. Like the air had weight. Her boyfriend Adam had been staying here off and on during her last semester. Said his lease was up and her place was closer to campus. I didn't question it. I liked the sound of laughter upstairs, of young people moving around, of someone else taking up space in this too-big house. But when Clara left for New York, Adam stayed. Just a week or two, he said. He wanted to figure things out. She didn't seem to mind. I didn't ask questions. That's where I failed first. I didn't ask. He was polite. Too polite. Did the dishes. Took out the trash. Called me ma'am for the first 3 days until I told him to knock it off. Then just called me Miss Dana like I was some sitcom stepmom. And I let it go. Because I liked the noise. The movement. The sound of someone upstairs. But I didn't expect the look he gave me that night I wore the robe. It was just a fleece wrap, something I grabbed out of the dryer because the thermostat was acting up again. But the way he looked at me, like I wasn't Clara's mother, like I wasn't anyone's mother, like he wasn't supposed to look, and he was doing it anyway. I should have told him to leave. I should have reminded him what Clara meant to both of us. I should have been the adult. But I just tightened the robe and said nothing. And now I can't stop asking myself this. What kind of mother doesn't slam the door on the one man her daughter trusted her with? The worst part is, I don't even know when the guilt started. It wasn't when his hand touched me. It wasn't when I felt myself hesitate instead of flinch. It was when I started listening for his footsteps. He always came downstairs after midnight. Grabbed a drink, ate leftovers. One night I waited in the kitchen pretending I was rearranging the fridge. And when he came down, our eyes met for too long. Nothing was said, but too much was felt. I keep hearing the soft pop of the fridge seal opening. That sound has started to haunt me. I don't think he meant for anything to happen. Not really, but I also don't think he was going to stop it if I didn't, and I didn't. If you've ever stared too long at the edge of something and told yourself you weren't going to jump, but you still leaned forward, you know what I mean. You know this story. You know what it means to be old enough to know better and lonely enough to still let it happen. If this hits somewhere deep and private, where you're not proud to look, then don't look away. Like and subscribe. Maybe we're not the only ones still living with what we never planned to want. I started staying up later without admitting why. I'd say I was doing laundry or reading or couldn't sleep. But really, I just wanted to be in the kitchen when he walked down those stairs. It wasn't flirting. Not in the way you'd think. It was quieter than that. Stiller. Like we both knew something was shifting, but neither of us wanted to say the words out loud, because once they were said, we'd have to live in them. One night, I asked him if he'd eaten yet. He hadn't. So I heated up some pasta, and we sat at the table like two people who had every right to be there. Like we weren't both thinking of the person who used to live in that house, who used to love him, who used to call me Mom in the hallway without a second thought. He didn't say much while eating, just nodded, wiped his mouth, said thank you. But his eyes lingered. They didn't move away from mine fast enough, or maybe I didn't look away first, like I should have. And then I laughed, not at anything in particular. I just laughed because it felt easier than silence. He smiled, said I always liked hearing you laugh. I shouldn't have let that sit between us. I should have said something sharp, should have mentioned Clara, should have shifted the conversation. But I didn't. I just looked down at my empty plate and said, "It's been a while since I've really meant it." There's something about the way guilt doesn't always scream at you. Sometimes it comes as quiet permission. In a look, a sentence, a too long pause. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling. The house was too quiet again. The kind of quiet that gets inside your head and repeats things back to you. I kept hearing myself say it. It's been a while since I've really meant it. That's when I knew I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was choosing. The next morning, I came down in leggings and a long sweater. Nothing inappropriate, nothing meant to draw attention. But he looked. I saw him glance and then look again, and I didn't stop him. There's this lie we tell ourselves that if we don't touch, we haven't done anything wrong. But it's a lie. One night, maybe 3 days after that, I came back from the grocery store, and he was on the couch, barefoot, hoodie, watching something on the small TV with the volume down low. I walked past him, arms full of bags, and he stood up to help. Our hands brushed over a carton of eggs. It wasn't anything, except it was. I turned to say thanks, and he was just close, too close. His voice was low when he said, "You're shaking." I didn't realize I was. That was the moment I should have stepped back. Instead, I just whispered, "It's cold." It wasn't cold. I was lying, and we both knew it. He nodded, backed off, helped me put the groceries away. Nothing happened that night. No touching, no lines crossed. But the silence was full, heavy. I lay in bed again and stared at the same damn ceiling. I should have been thinking about Clara. I should have been thinking about what I'd say if she called and asked if Adam was still here. But all I thought about was the way his hand had hovered near mine, just an inch too long, and how I didn't move away. Is silence a kind of consent? Is not saying no the same as saying yes? What would you call that? Because I've been asking myself every day since, did I betray her the first time he looked at me that way, or the first time I looked back? The eggs are still in the fridge. Every time I open it, I think about that night. I don't know why that detail sticks, but it does. Maybe because something cracked that night, not just between us, but inside me. I stopped pretending I was just hosting him. I started realizing I was waiting for him. And the worst part, it didn't scare me. It made me feel noticed. And when you've been invisible long enough, even the wrong eyes feel like oxygen. It was raining the night we crossed the line. Not pouring just that slow, steady kind of rain that makes everything feel softer and more dangerous. The kind that taps the windows just loud enough to be heard, but not loud enough to interrupt. I had made tea, just for myself really, but I poured 2 cups without thinking. He was in the hallway coming back from the shower. Bare feet on tile. Towel still draped over his shoulder. His hair was damp, curling slightly at the ends. He smelled like cedar soap. That same kind Clara used to bring home from her college trips. I should have gone to my room. I should have handed him the tea and left. Instead, I asked if he wanted to sit a minute. He looked at me. Really looked. His eyes searched mine like he was waiting for me to say something I didn't have the courage to say out loud. Then he nodded and followed me to the couch. We sat closer than we should have. Not touching, but not quite separated either. The kind of closeness that doesn't need contact to be charged. I handed him the tea. He wrapped both hands around the mug like he needed the heat. "I'm not gonna lie," he said quietly. "Sometimes I don't know if I should still be here. I should have taken that opening and told him to leave, that it was time, that this wasn't healthy for either of us. But I didn't. Instead I said, I don't know if I want you to go." He blinked, looked down at his cup, then at me. I mean, I added quickly, not like that. Just, the house feels empty when it's just me. He didn't say anything, just nodded. And then, like the air broke between us, he said, "Clara used to tell me how lonely you were." That hit harder than it should have, because it was true. And I think I hated that she saw it before I did anything about it. I stared into my tea like it could save me. "She said you always smiled at the right moments," he went on, "but she didn't think you were ever really happy." I didn't answer. I didn't know how to. Instead, I shifted on the couch, pulling the blanket over my lap, more to give my hands something to do than to keep warm. My fingers brushed his thigh by accident. I froze. He didn't move. I pulled my hand back, like it had burned me, whispering, "Sorry." He didn't say it's okay. He didn't laugh it off. He just looked at me, dead quiet, like he was seeing something he hadn't allowed himself to admit until that exact moment. The rain got louder, or maybe it just felt louder in the silence. Then he said, "You don't have to be alone tonight." Those 7 words sat between us, heavy as a confession. I didn't answer. He reached over slowly, deliberately, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed my jaw. I didn't pull away. That was the moment. That was the line. And I didn't stop him. We didn't say a word after that. Just moved unsure, hesitant but wanting. His lips found my neck first, then my collarbone. My breath caught, but I still didn't move away. I felt the weight of him. The warmth, the way his hand trembled, just slightly, as he touched me like he wasn't sure he had permission, but wanted it anyway. I should have said something. Anything. But I didn't. I let it happen. The couch was small. The blanket slipped off. The tea turned cold, and when it was over, I sat there, robe half open, heart hammering, and I couldn't even look him in the eye. He didn't try to kiss me again, just stood, pulled his hoodie back on, and walked out of the room without a word. I heard the guest room door close, and then the silence came back. Not the comforting kind, the kind that echoed everything we didn't say, everything we couldn't. I sat there until the rain stopped. Then I pulled the blanket back over me and stared at the window, wondering if the glass would crack under the weight of what I'd just done. Would Clara ever forgive me? Would I? Or was this who I'd been all along, just waiting for the moment I'd finally act on something I knew I'd never be able to take back? The next morning, I avoided the kitchen. I couldn't stand the idea of bumping into him while the coffee brewed, both of us pretending nothing happened, while knowing everything had. I stayed in my room until I heard the front door open and close. Only then did I come out. His mug was still on the table. He hadn't finished his tea. The air felt heavier, like it hadn't reset from the night before. Like the living room still remembered how warm my skin had been, how shaky my breath had gotten under his touch. I picked up the mug and washed it slowly, the water running too hot. I didn't know what the hell to do. That afternoon I texted Clara, just to hear her voice through words. She sent me a photo of her new place. She looked happy, free, unbothered. I couldn't stop looking at the background of the photo, like maybe I'd see something that reminded her of home, something that reminded me she still trusted me. But I didn't see anything. He didn't come home for dinner. He texted to say he'd be out late. No explanation. I made grilled cheese and tomato soup. Ate alone. The next night, he was back late again. I heard the creak of the stairs, the soft thud of his shoes hitting the floor just outside the door. I waited for a knock. None came. Just silence. At midnight, I opened my bedroom door and padded down the hall. The light was off in the guest room, but the door was cracked just enough to tempt me. I should have kept walking. I should have locked my door and slept with a clear conscience. But I didn't. I knocked gently. He didn't answer. I pushed the door open. He was lying there shirtless, eyes wide open in the dark, like he hadn't slept at all. "I can't sleep," I said. He didn't move, just shifted over, pulling the blanket back slightly. I climbed in. It wasn't passion, not like in the movies. It was slow, heavy burdened, like we both knew exactly what we were doing and hated how much we needed it anyway. My hand found his shoulder. His breath hitched. Our mouths barely touched at first, just breaths, mingling heat between us, building like a question no one dared ask out loud. Then it happened again. The way he touched me, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't even confident. It was hesitant, like he expected me to stop him at any moment. But I didn't. Not when his hands slid under my shirt. Not when he whispered, "Are you sure?" And I said no. But I didn't leave. The blanket tangled around us. The room smelled like laundry detergent and the faintest hint of sweat. I closed my eyes and let myself disappear into it, not because it felt right, but because it felt like the only thing that made me feel anything. When it was over, I stayed. He curled toward me, one hand on my waist, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like we hadn't just betrayed a girl who used to call this house home. I stared at the ceiling. It had a small water stain in the corner. I'd meant to fix it months ago, but never got around to it. Funny how the things you leave undone start to look like reminders. That stain. That stupid damp shape. I couldn't look away. It felt like it was watching me. Judging. I stayed until just before dawn. Then I slipped out, pulled the bedroom door closed behind me, and washed my face in the dark, like I could scrub away the guilt if I used cold enough water. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything. Just empty. And that scared me more than the shame. I told myself it was a one-time thing, but we both knew that was a lie. The kind you repeat not to convince others, but to silence the screaming inside your own chest. He made coffee that morning like nothing had happened. I didn't sit at the table. I just stood near the sink, sipping from my mug, trying not to shake when our shoulders brushed. He didn't speak, not a word. And that silence, it was almost louder than anything he could have said. I looked down at the mug. It was hers, Clara's. One of those novelty cups with "World's Okayest Student" printed in cracked navy letters. She left it behind like it didn't matter. Like she trusted we'd never make it matter. He finished his toast and said, "I've got errands. Won't be back until late." I nodded. Couldn't say anything. Not without my voice catching. I scrubbed the kitchen counters until they were raw, then sat in Clara's empty room. The smell was still faint, a mix of old shampoo, that fruity body spray she used too much of in high school, and the faint must of dust where her posters used to hang. Her closet was empty, except for a tangled scarf on the floor. I sat there, staring at it. How did I get here? How did a woman who once used to say I'd never be that kind of mother end up like this? I didn't cry. I just dissociated. I watched the light shift on the wooden floor, thought about how Clara used to sneak in from dates stepping on the same boards that creaked, and how I used to pretend not to hear. Now I was the one sneaking. That night he didn't come home. No explanation. No message. I told myself I was relieved, that I wanted space. But when the garage stayed dark past 10 p.m., I realized I was waiting for what to feel wanted again, to be told I wasn't the only one losing sleep. Around midnight, I walked barefoot into the living room, sat in the dark, turned the TV on muted, just the flickering glow playing scenes I didn't follow, and then the sound, the one that made my stomach turn, the front gate creaking. He was home. I didn't move, just listened. Keys, door, his shoes coming off. Then he walked in, saw me sitting there. We didn't speak. He sat on the floor beside the couch, leaned his head against my knee like some broken thing. And I didn't pull away. His voice was barely audible when he said, "This isn't just on you." And I whispered, "Don't say that." Because saying it meant naming it, meant it was real. He rested his forehead against my thigh. I could feel his breath through the fabric of my pants. I should have stood up, but I didn't. I touched his hair, just lightly, and for a moment I remembered what it felt like to matter. That was the worst part. It didn't feel like sin. It felt like warmth in a house that had been cold for too long. He didn't stay that night, just stood, eventually nodded once, and walked upstairs. I stayed on the couch, held the remote so tight my hand cramped. Clara's scarf was still in my lap. I don't know when I brought it out. I clutched it like it could anchor me to something decent, but it didn't. I held it all night. Didn't sleep, didn't move, just sat with a scarf that didn't smell like her anymore and a guilt that wouldn't let me forget. The next morning I opened the fridge and stared at the eggs like they could answer for me. He came downstairs while I was scrambling them like any other morning, but we didn't look at each other. I dropped the spatula. The sound made me flinch. He didn't react. I couldn't shake the way he pressed his forehead against my leg like he needed something from me. Not sex, not even comfort, just closeness. And I gave it. Not because I loved him, not because I wanted to ruin anything, but because I didn't know how to stop being needed. He sat at the table, the same chair Clara used to sit in. I served the eggs without a word. He didn't thank me. I didn't expect him to. Later that day, I walked past the hall mirror and paused. I didn't look older, but I looked hollow, like the kind of woman people glance at in the grocery store and think, she used to be pretty. I picked up Clara's scarf again. I don't know why I kept it in the living room now. Maybe because it reminded me of how badly I'd failed. Or maybe because touching something of hers made me feel like she was still close enough to forgive me. That afternoon I heard him talking on the phone in the guest room. His voice was low tense. I caught the name Clara. I froze in the hallway. He was asking when she was coming back for the rest of her things. There was silence on his end. Then, yeah. No, I'll be here. Just let me know. I backed away before he opened the door. My chest was tight. That evening, I sat on the back patio alone. The light was dim, the sky a pale blue washed in smoke from someone's barbecue 2 doors down. I could hear kids playing in the next yard, laughter. It felt obscene, like joy was too loud for this house now. He came out later holding a beer, offered me one. I shook my head. He didn't sit close this time, just leaned against the railing. And then he asked, "What happens now?" I laughed, not because it was funny, just because it was the only sound that wasn't silence. I said, "Nothing. We pretend it never happened." He nodded once, took a sip. Then, "You're not a bad person." And I said, "Don't give me that. We're not absolving each other." He didn't argue. When Clara finally came home to get the rest of her things, she barely stayed 10 minutes. She hugged me quick, barely touched my shoulder, then walked out again. I watched from the living room as she and her boyfriend loaded boxes into the car. They didn't even look toward the window. He was standing behind me, too close. I moved away. That night I changed the sheets in the guest room, not because anything had happened in that bed, but because it felt like something had. Some invisible thing I couldn't name had settled in that room and needed to be washed out. I lay in my bed with the scarf beside me. I didn't cry. That would have been a release. I just stared at the ceiling fans spinning, slow creaking every third turn. That creak, that was the sound I'd remember. Not his breath, not his hand, not even Clara's voice, distant and polite. Just that fan creak, quiet, rhythmic, slightly broken, like it knew something was wrong in the house and didn't know how to stop. I still hear it even when it's off.